Today we're going to be making a fantasy style garden using the Wisteria plants on Laguna Perfuma. So the island I've picked is already based from that biome, so I won't need to go and magic pencil a tree to get this started, but if you are on a different biome you'll need to head over to Laguna Perfuma just to grab the original tree. So once you have the tree in your blueprints, you can take it to where you want to build. I very much recommend getting villagers to do this. Don't try and recreate it yourself because it's just too complex. I use slimes. I think they seem to work the fastest in my opinion, and they're at least the easiest to go get. So I have about 8 usually that I have working for me. So here we can see I'd already created a 2-layer Wisteria tree, and we're going to do that here again now. So we want to put down our first blueprint just for the original tree and get them to build that. And once we've done that, we need to go up the top and create ourselves a little platform so that we're far enough back that the tree lines up, and then we want to place another one on top. Now because they spiral around almost completely, if you put one directly in front it will kind of continue up the spiral, but you could also place it slightly on a different angle, and then that way you can build up more interesting parts in the middle. So once you have the tree fully built, we can see the slimes have now built a 2-story tree. We can go ahead and put a few of those around. I made 3. I would recommend probably not doing too many more than that if you're doing them on an island where you plan to build other things. Because they are very tall, they can create some frame rate lag issues. I will probably have to take this off my island later when I start building more of my Pokemon stuff, because when you can see it in the distance, it can draw a lot of processing power, but it's quite beautiful. So we can see here the slimes are chipping away at the blueprint, and once they are done, then the trees themselves aren't going to look perfect. So once we have a full tree, I want to do one feature tree that is 2 of those trees kind of wrapped around each other. So knowing that I had placed it from the front, I want to place it to the left side, and now we have sort of a larger, more conical shape, and the sort of pincers all come up to create almost like a archway. So like I said, they won't look perfect when you've done this. You'll need to go through and fill in the gaps. Now, don't be scared of trying to make it look too right. I realized in building this, the secret isn't making the bark look perfect. It's covering the outside parts strategically with leaves and your lush leaves as well. So here you can see bits like this where there is an obvious break between the 2 blueprints. We can just go ahead and create a few pillars down. Using a mix of the regular bark and the mossy bark. You only get the mossy bark from the Laguna trees, you won't get them from the Soggy Skerry trees. And I recommend collecting a bunch of the sort of fancy decoration parts of the trees. There's 3 different types of branch. It is easier, especially when you're placing them up to the top, to create like a platform to sit them on, or at the least create a platform for yourself to be directly in front of them, because they can be a little bit tricky to place, but they add a really fantastic effect, and the trees themselves wouldn't look much without the option to have these 3 different root types, so make sure to use them a lot. There's no real formula to building trees like this. I do say doing things like this with a lot of decorating, it's just like painting. You feel scared to start the first few strokes, but once you've got something down on paper, it's a lot easier to actually envision what things will be. So don't be scared to just sort of throw in a bunch of bark and leaves and then chip back away at it. And as you're looking at it, if it sort of stresses you out sometimes and looks just completely wrong, I suggest going away, maybe go farm some more bark or something for 10 minutes and come back. Sometimes you really do just need fresh eyes to go, oh hey, that does actually look like a tree. So now once we've got a rough idea of what we want our trees to be like. I just marked out a section. I happen to have the purple padded floor on me. I don't want to use it. I just want to create a rough idea of where I was going to have my dining area. And I decided to do it between the two big trees that are close together because it seemed like it would be a perfect place to create a canopy with a root over the top. So what I've done is just grab these citadel columns, and I've used the big bases on the top and the bottom, and I've done them 4 high in the middle. And then what we're going to do after this is we're going to go around and we're going to make a glass roof, but we're going to border it with the block leaves. They're actually a really great block because they let light through, and obviously they look very natural. So because they won't connect to the columns, we do just need to do a little sort of grabbing block on each side, but that actually still has a nice effect, so we'll leave that there. And once we've gone around and done the entire border, if you look from the bottom, it does look a little bit chunky. So once we've put all of the glass and the leaves in, we'll actually go around and we're going to chisel those leaves so that they're half but on the top side. And I'll go back later actually and change the corner leaves to be full blocks so that we can hang some wisteria off them and it's not floating. We will go back later and hang a bunch of wisteria off this just to meet the total theme. Now I will go back and actually change this floor later, but I just wanted to get a rough idea of what I was doing. So I wanted something sunken in with some lights underneath. And your leaves can make a really good floor sometimes as well, especially with lights underneath. It means you get quite a nice sort of shiny effect coming through. So I'm going to put my dining table down. Like I said, I'm actually going to go back and change this later to the temple tiles, but this gives me a nice idea of what it's going to look like. Now, it's a good idea probably at this point as well to do just a little bit of decorating because you want to get an idea of what kind of objects you're going to need, how many different types of decorations you're going to need, and what sort of special features you can add. So we went ahead and put grass on top of the roof, like you can see, just to add a nice little effect to the vines. And so now I'm starting to dig out a pool. In the end, it becomes a nice little crescent-shaped moon, but I actually didn't mean to. I was just trying to make a natural-shaped pond. And then I sort of looked at it and realised that it was very moon-shaped, so I went in and define that a little bit more because it did turn out that it fits the theme with the sort of fantasy garden. And so yeah, now that we've done a bit of that decorating, it gives us a little bit more idea of that overall theme. Does everything match? Do we need to change anything before we go any further? One thing I'll mention with decorations too is don't be thrown off by where you originally find the decorations. I'm going to use a decent amount of decorations that I found in Soggy Skerry, which is obviously supposed to be sort of based on Furrowfield and slightly toxic, I guess. But the reeds and the stalwart and all of the glowing mushrooms, things like that, they actually look really great on green grass and have a totally different look to when you use them with muddy water. Same with the palm fronds and some of the tropical items. If you only use a few of them in a build, they can really accent what you're already doing, and to me it really made sense to use those fiddle ferns, the curly ferns, because they very much add to that fantasy theme. And I want to make sure that I go around and do a lot of those small branches we were talking about on the bottom level as well, because that way it's going to add a lot more definition. Once I've done that, I also want to put a few roots in the pond. Again, it's just to add a little bit of continuity to make it look like the trees are actually growing up through the ground, and because that bit of the ground is a little bit lower, you're more likely to see some roots. I'll also go through and put a fountain in the middle. I originally put 5 in when I do it, but I do change it back to 1 because it was a little bit overpowering. So because it's also a very purple theme, I recommend using one accent color. So here, after we do the pond, we're just going to refill it and make it shallow. I think because we're using the hummus as the base, it's nice to be able to see that texture through. But we want to have a few accent colors like that colored lights that are under the dining table there, we just want to add a few little different pops of colour. So I'm going to do some black flowers because I want flowers, but I don't want them to stand out too much in comparison to the wisteria. And I'm also going to use a lot of the big bushes and medicinal bushes because they always are a really easy way to add a little bit of texture and variation to most types of biomes. And once we've finished with the pool, I do go around and use the darker green lime grass to add just a bit of definition around that moon shape. Now that I've decided I want it to be a moon, I want it to be a little bit more obvious that that's what it is. And now that we've done a bit of that and got a bit of a feel of what we're doing, we're going to go back and we're going to chisel the whole small sides on each side back to full blocks and the corner blocks so that we can hang a bunch of wisteria, like I said before, just to match the overall theme. And generally it goes crown, middle, root, but you can definitely play around. They pretty much tile well. The only ones that don't really tile well together are the root on top of the crown, because the crown block has a small gap that kind of exists in the top and it looks a bit funny. But switch between the crown, the center and the root as you're tiling your wisteria, and it gives it a little bit more of a texture feel so they don't all look the same. And remember, just don't make them all the same length or make them all going ascending or descending height. Make sure to have some very short and some very long. So now I've decided we want to, as a nice feature, have a large root overhanging the roof of the little plaza and coming down the side. So this isn't something, honestly, that I have done before, but it is something almost I wanted to show that if you kind of just confidently put down a few blocks and just keep working at it, you'll be surprised sort of the shapes you can make. So I looked up big old tree branches and thought about it for a bit, and I'm like, okay, they kind of go up and down, and I know it needed to come off the side of one tree, so I thought I'd make it sort of an S shape that was raised in the middle. And so as you can see, the start shape wasn't really much of anything, but I knew I wanted to use the long pointy root on the end because I figured even if it looks a bit blocky in the middle like the trees, once you put those accent pieces on, it all comes together. So I took it back off so that I could hang a piece of wisteria under it. But now that it's done, just like decorating the wisteria trees, I just went through and made a big chunky section, and then I chipped out the blocks and added leaves and mossy bark just to make it look a bit more textured. So you can see I've gone back now and changed over to the temple tiles, and I left the lights there, but I just made it a checkered floor with glass peeping through those lights. And so now we want to kind of start doing a bit more of the actual setup of what's going to be on the table. I want it to look quite rich and full. It's got a very, again, a fantasy theme, but a very luscious theme. So we want to make sure that there's a lot of bountiful goods available. And at this point I wanted as well to go ahead and put in a lot more normal trees just to add a little bit more variation and texture and to make it feel more like a forest without having to put more of those wisteria trees in, which can potentially cause lag, like I said, if you put in too many. I mentioned earlier too about just having a pop of colour, so we're going to use just a couple of sunflowers just to really accent all of that purple, and the sunflowers themselves are highlighted because they look so different, and it also helps show how bright that purple is. Now, once we get to this part, I've looked around and I've left one of the gaps in the trees between those blueprints so that I can put a little house. It's not actually going to be very functional just because it's going to be so small, but from the outside it's going to look quite nice. So because it is quite small, I'm actually building a large platform instead of using my scare cub like I usually would. They're really great to get up and down spaces, but they very much can get in the way when you're trying to build in a very small area. So for this, I just made a yellow platform that's going to be easy for me to remove later, and that way I'm going to be easily eye level with what I'm trying to build. All I really want to do is put in a few essentially false walls with a border roof and a light inside, and that way it's going to look like a little tree house. So I just grabbed some of the cracked floorboards, just so I know that it's a different block and I can tell where I want to put the roof. And then I'm just going to go around and do one nice little cap, and then put in a little bit of detailing. Again, with this, it's going to be more about what it looks like from the outside than it being functional on the inside. NPCs would be unlikely to use a building like this if they had other beds available, because it's so high. Their pathfinding is pretty simple, so I wouldn't probably try and make those houses too functional if they only have ladders going up. So here I've just gone through and put in some wooden brackets to finish off that nice roof, and I'm going to extend some of the wooden fencing to make sure it looks supported. So now that we've already done one roof, I decided to do another one as well. We're going to do one at the front and one at the back, and I just used that same principle. I just tried to do pretty much an S shape that was a couple of blocks high, and then I went and chipped out the bottom block for most of it, and then just start making it thicker and thicker and a little bit higher as you go, and then throw in a few leaf blocks, and then usually I'll come back, chip away a few, and then add in some of those accents. Now, while I was doing this, I also noticed that you can get a really nice effect with the fancy lights. If you have a look, the light makes the wisteria shine pink instead of purple. I'm not really sure why, but it's a really beautiful effect. It makes the wisteria look very different. So I've gone through and put about 7 lights hidden in the trees. I literally just knocked a block out and stuck it in and put a leaf over the top. Now I decided on the top as well here, as you can see what I'm doing, to add another little false building on the top of the largest wisteria tree that had the 2 pincers. Because these probably aren't going to be used, I don't recommend that you allow them to register as rooms. Because you have a 100 room limit per island, there's no point in having things that won't be used registering as a room. So now that we've done that, I've decided we want to do a little kitchen out the back of that large tree, just as one of the final accents, just to add to the whole story of the garden. If there's a big banquet hall there, it kind of makes sense to have a kitchen. So it's just a simple kitchen, and I just dug down and put the bonfires in the ground and some fry pans on top with a chest. And I just done a little roof with 2 caps. Again, it's pretty rudimentary. It's just to add to the general theme, and I do like using the drapery doors as just a decoration hanging sometimes like that. So that is pretty much it. Obviously that wasn't a structured tutorial like some of the other ones that I've done, but because this is all just sort of decorating, I recommend don't be scared, do what I did and just start having a go, putting in a lot of stuff and have fun.